What they did was to keep me, and then what they used to keep other people to stay is that they use your dreams against you. They use your goals and what you want to do in life as like an anchor to hold you down and force you to stay. And every single time I had even a shred of doubt, Steve would come up to me and say, "What about your poor mother? Don't you want to retire your mother, Kirk, for all the work that she did for you?" Or they would say, "What about the children, Kirk? Don't you want to open your theater company?" And it was horrible. And they would use this in such a way that they didn't care about what my goals and dreams were. They were just concerned with that I was selling.
Okay, Kirk, you worked for a Cydcor branch
Yes.
on the East Coast for a while, a few years ago, and your story is very similar to ones that we hear a lot, that are on Reddit posts all over the internet. You got your bachelor's degree, you were a college graduate, you were looking for work, and you unfortunately came across a position that you said was advertised through your school. It was a
That's
career
correct.
opportunity advertised on your college's website. So
Correct.
can you kind of take us through that? What did you notice in the job ad, and that whole process of getting involved with Cydcor?
Sure. Well, looking back, hindsight's 2020, of course. So
Sure.
looking back, you could definitely see the red flags. But since I was desperate for work and I didn't want to pursue graduate school, which would have taken longer, um, the job sounded great. It said we're looking for highly motivated people. We deal with a lot of client relations, which they didn't use the phrase door-to-door sales. They didn't even have sales in the ad. It was all this really vague corporate talk that, looking back, I really should have noticed. But that they said competitive pay and benefits, and they said like salary on top of commission, which again sounds really good on paper. One thing I noticed too is with all these Cydcor ads that I've seen, they use a lot of like bright colors, like grab people's attention. It's really manipulative and weird how they just set up the ads themselves. But so what they said was, if you're a highly motivated person, you like to move up in the world, we have a job where you move quickly and get you to where you can have your full potential and all that. So I sent them an application, and it had to be less than, I think, 24 hours later, they had called me and wanted to schedule an interview, which I did. Now that was back in, I think it was the end of 2016 when I had the interview and I applied for the job, but it wasn't until June that I actually started working for it. So essentially, I had the job guaranteed to me, and I just kept it because I had nothing else to. I had nowhere else to go right after college, and I was so desperate for work.
Okay. And your experience with the office and the interview is similar to so many people we hear. It was, there was like no furniture. There was nothing special about the office. Everybody kind of looked the same, and then you met the owner, who was young, another trademark. Most of these owners are in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And you went through this interview, and based on the letter you sent us, it sounds like you felt that they could tell that they could get you sucked into this.
Yes. Looking back, the person that I interviewed, who we'll call Steve, when he did the interview, he had a lot of similarities with me. So we had similar tastes in like cartoons and movies and things like that. So he would use these personal talking points to sort of like relate to me. And I guess that like what I saw was like, oh, someone very similar to me is doing this. There's no way this could be a pyramid scheme because I'm not going to fall for that. So someone like me wouldn't fall for that. And looking back, I just remember like the way that he spoke and like his facial expressions with me. It definitely had that semi-malicious intent of like, we have a guy that's going to stay. We have a guy that's going to come work for us because we were so similar. Well, on surface level similar.
Sure. You mentioned earlier that the word sales never appeared in any ad or anything like that, which is again is very common. You eventually ended up selling door to door Verizon FIOS.
Correct.
When did you find out that that was in fact what the job was?
So I didn't even find out I found out in the interview that we were involved with Verizon FiOS, but the way that they had structured the interview, the way that they had said it, they made it sound like what it was is that there were people already interested in the service. So maybe like a business kind of thing. So representatives would go to predetermined locations, sell it there, and then come back, which of course was not correct. I didn't find out until the day I went out in the field that this was door-to-door sales selling Verizon FiOS. That was the day that I found out.
Wow. You went into great detail about the horrors of the field, and I know that the vast majority of people who get into this, they don't like the field, and that's something that the business themselves talks about quite a bit in the morning meetings, is that you're not here for the field, you're here to learn the work ethic and all the other garbage that they say the field teaches you to get to ownership, where you can make all this money that doesn't exist. But you and like I said, you can get it as personal as you want to, because you got very detailed in the message you sent us. But when I first read this, it reads like a horror script, honestly. Like I can't imagine. It's bad enough that anybody who applies for a job has to go through this to make money, but to make the pittance that you made on top of all this, it's almost like rubbing salt into wounds. It sounds horrible. So whatever you would like to share, tell us a little bit about your field experience of this door-to-door sales position.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to go into detail. I like talking about it. So the first day of the field, I was with Steve. He was my team lead, and we had gone to an area in Delaware. We stopped for lunch at a KFC, which is kind of off-putting. I personally don't like fast food, and this is like a big thing of the culture, was always eating quickly. So we got to the KFC, and then we stopped. And by the way, I was the one who had to drive. So Steve didn't have a car, so they made me on my first day drive out to Delaware to sell FiOS. So we get there, and I'm completely horrified. I had no idea that it was going to be walking in neighborhoods like round and round in circles for 8 hours plus a day. I had no idea that people didn't know we were coming. Like I had asked, hey, do people know that we're coming? And they said, oh yes, we send out mailings. And I'm like, but people don't always read their mailings. That doesn't make sense. And I mean, the first day was probably about as rough as the other days were. There were some people that were genuinely nice that did at least listen, but either they failed credit, which you have to check to get the service, or it just wasn't a good deal for them. Then we move on. But some people were absolutely nasty, which I get. I completely understand why people are so rough with door-to-door salesmen. Like after my experiences, I'm kind of that way too. But like, I remember towards the end of the day, Steve had pushed me to go up to a door. And so I knocked on the door, said, hey, good afternoon. My name is Kirk with whatever. I don't even remember the script. And the woman told me to go screw myself and slam the door. And I went back to Steve, and I'm like, well, that was kind of harsh. And he just kind of brushed it off like it was normal. Like it was normal for people to use profanity and to get rough with you. So that was my first day. There was back in 2017, there was the eclipse that had happened. So they had forced us to go outside and sell FiOS door to door during an eclipse, and it was dangerous to be outside, like looking at light with like no protection besides like your own sunglasses. So that's just one like time detail that I remember. Delaware is a very weird state when it comes to door-to-door sales. I honestly don't know why they selected that market. So from what I understand, the way that it works in Delaware is that there's certain areas that you can sell in and certain areas that you can't. But of course, being with Cydcor, that didn't matter. Like you would just go wherever. And they would say, oh, do you have a permit? And we'd be like, yes, which was a lie. We never had legitimate permits to be selling what we were selling. But cops were called on us a lot. People didn't get physically violent, but they did threaten. People would threaten to like hurt you or throw you out. I did get dogs threatened on me one time, not sent, but they did say, you ring this door one more time, we're going to throw the dogs on you and all that stuff. And at the time, to me, I was in a situation where like I maxed out all my credit cards. Like I was so far behind in my debt that I have to pay that like I couldn't eat, and I was hungry. Like I was literally like starving. So it was very disheartening to like knock on doors and people curse you out and slam the door in your face without me even getting to anything that I was saying when I was like, I need help.
Yeah.
You know, and that was hard. Um, there was one time where it was in the middle of August, so it was a pretty hot summer, and I was so stressed out. I had gotten out of my car and I threw up all over myself, like all over myself, like all over my clothes and everything. So of course I didn't have a change of clothes that I could put into because we had to wear like Verizon gear. So I had to drive back to my apartment, which took like an hour. I had to wash my clothes, which took like another hour. Then I went back out into the field, and I didn't sell that day. And when I went up to Steve, I said, "Hey," he's like, "Why didn't you sell today?" I was like, "Steve, I vomited on myself and I couldn't." And he was like, "Oh, well, you should have sold anyway." And it's like that's so awful. Like that there was never any concern for anyone's like physical or like mental health. All they had cared about was selling. That's 100% what they were for. And I think it was around that point where I started to have the idea that this isn't right, and that I should leave. So when I was in there for a few months, a guy came in. We'll call him Rick, and he was a killer salesman, like absolutely killer. I mean, he would make $1,000 a week on like every single week. It was insane, and he was being groomed to be like the next manager. They wanted him to be the next assistant manager. I mean, he was getting interviews like every single day, trying to build his crew to get moved out. And one day I went out with him, and it was weird. Something didn't feel right. So we had gone out and we tried to sell, and we barely made any of the money that he made. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of weird that when he's by himself he sells so well, but when he's with other people he doesn't. Well, it turns out what had happened was he was harassing people so much that they just took the sale, and he moved out the install date for Verizon so far ahead in the month that he would get paid before the install date would come. So what happened was that at the end of the month, he owed over like thousands of dollars to Verizon, because when the people cancel your sale, it's called the clawback, where they take the money back that you owe them. And I thought that was cool, because I was like, so that's what you're doing.
So a real life scammer, basically.
Really,
We know this whole thing's a scam, but
exactly. Yeah. But this was like the epitome of like real life scammer. And of course, he got chewed out by the owner. Oh, how could you do this? But I'm like, but no one questioned this. No one thought it was weird that he was selling thousands of dollars a week. I mean, that just, those kinds of numbers don't exist. It does not make sense to be doing so well. And I mean, one thing too is that he got so many complaints. I mean, people wrote to Verizon to complain about him on like how mean he was and how pushy he was as a salesman. It was incredible. Like I was so dumbfounded, and it was kind of satisfying to see the look on the owner's face when he realized that he's been like advocating for this scammer for his legitimate business. And I thought that was funny. So we would do this thing called business trips, where we would go to another person's office. And the point of going to the other person's office was either to get someone promoted, like to force sales under their code name to get them promoted, or, and I kid you not, it was to embarrass the sales place that we were going to. Like our owner would literally send us to places with the intention of embarrassing them by like getting so many more sales. It's embarrassing. And I always thought that was kind of weird. But I was in New Jersey, and I was there for maybe 2 or 3 days. And then one day I had knocked on the door. A person came down, and went through the whole pitch. He said he was interested, but he had to talk to his partner. I'm like, perfectly fine. I'll come back tomorrow. So I went back the next day, rang the doorbell. Nothing happened. Okay, probably not home. Did my loop. Again, knocked on the door. Nothing happened. Okay. And then right before I leave, knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, and he came down. And I guess his doorbell must have been broken, or he was just frustrated that I kept coming back. And he cursed me out. He said, get off my property. You broke my doorbell, XYZ, XYZ, and bam, slammed the door in my face, which was weird, because the day before he was so open and friendly and said that he wanted the service. which was pretty surprising. That one caught me by surprise too. Like it's funny to me how quickly people go from like calm to like unhinged. You know, it never ceases to amaze me how quick that gets. Um, that was the time in New Jersey. We also were always out in the rain. Like I wasn't there long enough to be out in the snow, thank God. But they didn't care if it was raining, thunder, did not care. You always had to go out. So I mean, you would be drenched. I mean, drenched like from your shirt to your shoes. Like I had to throw away shoes before just because they got soaked from being out in the rain. And what's funny is like, you know, normally you don't sell that high in the rain anyway because people aren't going to answer the door. You know, the water's going to come in, and you just look gross too. And that was always frustrating as well. It's like, you know, you're putting people in these extreme conditions, you know, not just the heat, but also the rain. And like I said, in the winter, they'll have you go out when it's snowing. Like they do not care about your health at all. It's almost amazing how awful it is.
Yeah, and that it stuns me, and by this point it really doesn't because I've heard so many of these stories, but it still
Sure.
stuns me how no empathy, no care, concern for any human element, any human aspect of anything. Like it's you are all machines to
Mm-hmm.
them. You know, if you're not making money, that's it. If you're making money, fine. If you're not making sales, you know, it's something you did, everything's an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for a lot of individuals, especially you know, fresh college graduates, college students, a lot of times, people that have very little work experience, this can come off as normal to them. You know, they don't
Right.
know what a normal working environment's like, and they're
Mm-hmm.
put through all this awfulness, and they think, well, I guess this is what work is. You know, this is what it's like to have a job. No, it's not. This is awful.
Mm-hmm.
This is absolutely horrendous. And you know, um, one of the things I always have to wonder is, and I never did door to door, thank God, but you know, how were you psychologically at this point in your life? Like at the end of finally at the end of the day, when you could go home and you could decompress, you didn't have to do anything else. Like, how did you mentally survive and come back the next day to put yourself through all of that garbage yet again?
That's a hard question to answer, honestly. So right after I had left college, I was on medication for different things, and which helped. But what happened was I ran out eventually because they didn't offer health insurance. So it's not like I could go afford to see a psychiatrist because I was so broke.
Yeah.
So I had to force myself to wean off the medicine, which was another thing that they would always use that as like a pain point against me. They would be like, "Oh, Kirk didn't sell today. Better take your happy pills." You know, and they just had no empathy for what I was going through mentally or physically or anything like that. But I think what ultimately was that me running out of the medication was what gave me the strength to leave. You know, I was just I was horrible. Like I would go and I would like just break down every day. Like, I mean, I would cry sometimes, you know, I would just be like lost and confused because I would go home to my apartment by myself and like, you know, not enough money to not enough money for food, but maybe I would like force myself to drink to try to cope with it. I mean, I was in horrible shape, especially towards the end. And it was emotionally taxing, especially as it went on and on, because you know, not only do you work Monday through Friday from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., you're also working Saturday, and then sometimes if we didn't sell, we would go out on Sunday. So it was just this constant cycle of work, and I had nothing to show for it. And I mean, mentally, it was just absolutely horrible. What they did was to keep me and then what they use to keep other people to stay is that they use your dreams against you. They use your goals and what you want to do in life as like an anchor to hold you down and force you to stay. So two of my goals was to, of course, retire my mother. I mean, who doesn't want to have enough money so that mom doesn't have to work anymore? And as a theater person, I had to open like a nonprofit theater where children come see shows for free because I did that kind of charity work when I was in college. And every single time I had even a shred of doubt, you know, Steve would come up to me and say, "What about your poor mother? Don't you want to retire your mother, Kirk, for all the work that she did for you?" Or they would say, "What about the children, Kirk? Don't you want to open your theater company?" And it was horrible. And they would use this in such a way that they didn't care about what my goals and dreams were. They were just concerned with that I was selling. I mean, I could have had like the worst goal, as long as I would have $1,000 a week, they would have been fine with it. But it was just so taxing the way that they would manipulate people. And it wasn't just me, of course. I mean, a lot of people had similar goals, retiring a loved one, having financial freedom, doing something great, opening like a nonprofit or a shelter or something like that, which are fairly admirable goals. And they would just use that against you. And it was awful, you know, because I would think to myself, oh, well, I'm going through all this, but people that I want to help or have it worse. So I'm doing it for people. And, it was just awful the way that they would do that.
Yeah, that's straight up emotional manipulation is what it is, and emotional control, which is a very well-known tactic of cults. And you actually, in your message to us, you used the word cult. You
Mhm.
said the best way to describe the office life was a cult.
Mhm.
And you just mentioned using your own goals against you. That's one of the reasons why they talk about goals all the time. It's to give off this impression that they want you to succeed, and they want you to always be looking forward and be very goal oriented. But like you said, really, it's to use those same goals against you whenever you have that sliver of doubt, whenever you have that moment to yourself, or whenever things are just so awful, you want to just quit because you can't go on anymore. No, what about those goals that you want? Yeah, they use it against you. And you talked a lot about the office culture. And again, every office, doesn't matter where you go, if it's Delaware, if it's Philadelphia, Chicago, LA, Miami, wherever, every office is run the same. Doesn't matter if it's Cydcor, Smart Circle, Credico, whatever.
Mhm.
But kind of take us through what you noticed in the office culture, and some of the things that you were required to do, some of the things that you kind of had reservations about
Mhm.
doing, and just kind of take us through that whole scenario.
Sure, sure. I mean, the office life it's unlike anything that I've ever seen. I mean, I work in an office now, and it's nothing like that. Completely different. So one of the things, of course, that we were in charge of is keeping up this facade that what we're doing is profitable. So we would dress in like suits and ties in the morning. We had to make sure that they were pressed and clean. Like we had to be so like clean shaven. We had to be very presentable for all the new people coming in. And then once the new people left, well, then we would change and get into our Verizon gear and go. Um, One thing to mention, and I'll talk about my leader because I have a lot of reservations with him and what he did to me specifically. But one example is that I was one of the few people that had a car, so I would be forced to drive a lot of people out. Well, what they would do is they would when I would put my suits down, they would put their stuff on top of it. They would throw my things around. They would ball it up. So when I would take it out, it would be wrinkled. And so one day, like he approached me, said, "Hey, Kirk, your suit's wrinkled." And I said, "Well, then stop telling people to throw their crap in my car, and then it won't be wrinkled anymore." And he didn't like that very much. But anyway, back to the office culture. Um, the facade was a big thing to it. Looking back, everything was very like weirdly sexual in a way, and I always thought that was weird. Like the way that like the men and the women in the office would interact with each other, it was just I don't know. There's no other way that I can describe it besides just really, really weird and sexual. Now they did say that they prefer that you don't date and sleep with coworkers, but honestly, I really think they encouraged it. To have that more like closer connection to people. Like if you have a physical connection with someone, well, you're probably more likely to stay. And I just remember that it was always really really weird. And of course, like I spent like my time with a lot of like the guys in the office because we would go out together on like team days and stuff, and they would just talk about like the things they want to do to their coworkers, and I would always correct them and say, "Dude, that's kind of gross. Like I don't want to hear that. Like don't say that." And like of course if you brought it to the owner's attention, like he would just brush it off. He's like, "Oh, this is what it is. It's just normal." I don't know if he was sleeping with any of his coworkers, but if I found out that he did, it wouldn't really surprise me. um, but that was one of the things. And one thing that always bothered me too is like some of the men were like older than me, like maybe in their like 30s, their 30s doing this, and they would be talking about like 18-year-olds who just started. I'm like, that's really creepy, man. You shouldn't be doing that. I mean, I was 23 at the time, and if I talked like that, it'd still be creepy. You know what I mean? And it would be just disturbing. And I feel like what they planted in people's heads too is that like once you reach the high levels of this company, you'll be able to get all the women you want to sleep with. You'll have endless money to do whatever you want. And I think that was a decent motivator for a good number of people who just wanted to just have people to be with.
Yeah.
So that was a part of the office culture too. I mean, of course, I mean, you also you probably heard this before, but we would always do like chants in the morning, like, why are we here? Opportunity, all kinds of stuff like that. And, eventually it just became so ingrained in my brain that like, I didn't even think about what I was saying when I was saying it. Like they would be like, hey guys. And then we would go, hey, what? And then, they let the people talk about goals and how the week is going and all that. But looking back, it's weird how like that just became what it was, I would come in, I would say the chants and then I would go out. One thing that I was responsible to was, teaching like basic theory, if you want to call it that. I actually have my old notebook, but like I would go through like different theories on like how to sell and like what your goals are for selling.
Yeah.
And I would teach this to like the new people, so they would force me to be in this like leadership position where I was helping perpetuate this cycle.
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of interviews, but I did do a lot of training. I did a lot of like theory pressing. Like I'm not sure why, honestly. Like maybe they liked the way that I talked or something like that, but they always had me do that. And eventually I just kind of realized that it doesn't mean anything. Like all these theories that they use are so broken and fake. Mm-hmm. Like there's one that they have. Here's a little picture if we can see it. It's called donkey theory. And the theory is that there's a carrot in a hole, and the donkey goes down into the hole, and the farmer doesn't realize the donkey's there. So this farmer's like shoveling dirt on this donkey. And they said that, the donkey could either die, and they would say this, like the donkey could just straight up die, or it can climb out the dirt that's on it and come out on top alive. And looking back, I'm like, that's a horrible thing to tell people, that it's like, we're going to cover you in dirt until you either die or you come out. But like, I don't know. It was just horrible. The things that they would say. And of course they gave theories too on like selling, there's like gumball theory or something like that.
I remember the gumball theory. Yeah.
Yes. Where it's like a gumball machine and that comes down, and sometimes you get a winner and sometimes you get a loser. And we just always taught these things. And it's funny because it's like I was a psych major in college and I don't know any of these theories from any of the classes I took,
which is all made up nonsense.
Exactly. And it doesn't cease to amaze me how like you just buy into, here's a good one. So this is called the emotional cup. And it's like you want to fill the cup with good so it doesn't overflow, which I guess is their response to people having like, breakdowns and getting stressed out, which of course they are. Mm-hmm. But it's like they make your emotional state so simple, they call it a cup. It's just crazy. I mean, the list goes on and on as I look through this. But I mean, every single day I'd be teaching different theories and, getting people's hopes up and just perpetuating this cycle. One thing too, maybe not about the office specifically, but about like the culture of it, is we spent so much time out of work with the other members of the office. I think maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and this was mandatory. You had to go. So like we would go bowling, or we would go out for drinks, or we would go out and do some sort of team building. But what was crazy is that more often than not, you couldn't afford to go out bowling or to go out for drinks on a Thursday night because you weren't making enough money anyway. But that's also how they got their hooks in, is that you were surrounded by these people all the time. And because they were surrounded by all these people, they became your network. They became the people that you talked to, you saw on the weekends, you hung out with on a regular basis. I mean, like I said before, they isolate you and take you away from your family and friends. I mentioned in the document I sent, like I unintentionally burned down so many friendships that I didn't mean to. And because of this, they just took me away from my family and friends. I mean, romantic relationships fell out. That didn't work because I wasn't physically or emotionally available. I would get home from a week of selling FIOS and I would just be exhausted. I would pass out. But that was also awful too. Just going out all the time with the people every day. I did not like that at all. Because sometimes you want a break from your coworkers, but they're not. But they're not your coworkers. They're your cult family, and you have to spend every waking moment with them. It was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're spot on about the whole cult thing. Like everything you've mentioned, these are techniques of not just Cydcor and Smart Circle and Critical, but any cult. Pick any religious or personality cult that has ever existed, and they are using these exact same techniques of intimidation, of isolation, of emotional and behavioral manipulation, and all of these other things to get you to stay, to mold your mind. Essentially, that's a nice way to say brainwash you, to get you to believe what they want you to believe, to not have a critical vocabulary or critical set of viewpoints, right? Because the only thing that you can believe is what these people tell you. Everything else is wrong. Everyone else outside is a failure. The people who don't make it are failures and they're quitters.
Mm-hmm.
So, you had to go through all of this, and just like everybody else who I've talked to, you eventually had enough, right? Eventually there was a time where it was just too much and you got out. So what was the final straw?
It is hard to remember what the final straw was, but I think I could say where it started. So we would have parties on the weekend once in a while. They believe that you need to have like a raging party where you get super drunk and you like let go of everything. You let go of all your frustration. And there was a party that we had went to, and there was a woman from another office that was coming to see us. And during this party, she didn't really want to be there. She wasn't having a good time, and I got that. So my leader, Steve, wanted to sleep with her, and he wanted to like get her drunk enough so he could take advantage of her. And he got blasted that night, but she didn't. So I saw what he was doing. I knew where this was going, and I'm like, I'm not going to let this happen. So I took her home. Like I said, you're coming with me. I'm just going to take you home. We won't talk about this. Just get you out of here. And then I went back to pick up Steve. And it was just so sad what I saw in front of me. It was this guy in his 30s, like not blackout, but pretty close. And he was like falling over himself, and he was going on about how like, he wants to sleep with certain coworkers. And I was just horrified by that. I'm like, you're supposed to be the person that I look up to for support, and the person that I kind of I want to be like. Absolutely not. I would never force someone to take advantage of them like he tried to do. And I would assume that's not the first time that he did that. But I think seeing that, and like just his general treatment of me was finally pushed me to be like, okay, I'm done. Like I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be here. I don't want to work like this. Like this isn't work. It's like slavery pretty much. You know what I mean? But I think that would be it. I mean, I can go on and on about stories about Steve. I mean, he was just the worst. I said in my paper, he's like the embodiment of the 7 deadly sins, and I mean that sincerely. Like any quality of being envious or greedy, lustful, all of it combined into one package. There was one week where I sold a lot more than him, like a couple $100 more, and he was mad. He was angry at me for beating him, and I said, well, aren't you proud of me? Like, I used what you taught me. I was able to make more money than you for a week. Like, aren't you proud? And he's like, well, yeah, but no, because you shouldn't be better than me. And like, that was another point where it's just like, so you actually don't care about me. You just want me to sell for you. You don't want me to be better than you. I mean, stuff like that too. Just a constant barrage of like, of just him, just who he was as a person, and his slimy, manipulative, evil tactics, which really just pushed it over the edge. So when I finally quit, it was around October. When I finally quit, I decided on a Sunday night, I'm like, I'm not going in. I quit. So I sent the owner an email, and I told him, I said, listen, I'm done. Like, I'm not working for you anymore. And after he responded to the email, he didn't even say, okay, fine. He said, take the next week off of work and get back to me next Sunday. And the answer was the same. I was already looking for jobs at that point. And I was like, my answer is still no. But it's crazy because when you take a week off of work, you don't get paid. You know, you're not going to have a check. And I think there was like some last ditch effort of like trying to get me to stay, showing that I don't have any money, which didn't matter because I was broke anyway. You know what? I could not go any lower, you know, so it was pointless. But that was like his final Hail Mary trying to get me to stay. And I still told him no. And that was really like the last thing I ever said to him.
The characteristics of your former leader, that you described, as repulsive as they sound, he kind of sounds cut out for the business, honestly, because those are the qualities that you pretty much have to have to make it. You know, all these Cydcor higher ups that are worshipped in the cult. You know, I'm sure they had to copy, cheat, and steal, and do whatever else to get to where they are. And you know, if you embody those characteristics and you have absolutely no ethics and you have absolutely no cares about who you screw, well, both literally and figuratively, you know, clients, employees, anybody like that, then you know, this probably could be successful for you. You know, you probably could do well in this cult. You know, a lot of the people I talk to talk about their owners the same way. They say that they are master manipulators. They are cult leaders. They try to influence everything a person does and says. Everybody goes to the morning meetings and want to be like them and worship them and want to have as much money that they supposedly have, even though they may be living with 4 other people in a slop house. They just give off this impression that they have money. There's just so much smoke and mirrors with this operation. And I know you talked a little bit about your you know, your psychological state of mind while you were in Cydcor, and you even mentioned as well that the effects of being there, even though it's been a few years, have been lasting, right? This is something that even though you left, you escaped, let's be honest, you escaped, you still carry it with you.
In a way, I mean, I do. I mean, that's what kind of pushed me to reach out and talk about my experiences, because normally what ends up happening is that when I try to open up and talk about it, I just get like, I get angry. Like I get really angry about what happened. And I don't want that anymore. You know, like I don't want to carry this burden of being angry about what happened. I just want to get it out and move on, you know. But I mean, you know, like I said before, like with the abuse from like the field, like let's say I'm driving somewhere, like I still to this day get nervous when I drive into like a neighborhood that I don't know. Like I just get this like twinge of like, ooh, I don't know if I should be here. Like, ooh, this isn't really safe right now, even though I totally am. Like I still get that. It's harder for me to make new friends. I will say that. Like when I started my new job, like I kept to myself a lot, and I didn't talk to a lot of people. And through good people that I was meeting, I was able to get through that. But I mean, it took some years to be able to start to open again, just because of how badly I was hurt and how badly they manipulated me and used me. You know, it's like I went in, you know, so happy-go-lucky and so ready to make money and live my life. And then when I got out, I was just in this like dark, this dark, sad place, you know, and I got out of it eventually, you know, working on myself and meditating and talking about it. It got me through, but I mean, it was hard. It was hard. I mean, even now, like I'm still angry about it, but you know, the more that I think about it, like getting my words onto paper and just talking with more people, it's healing in a way. It's very, very healing, and I'm in a much better place now than I was back then. Do I wish that it was completely over and I still wasn't nervous and I still didn't get these feelings from time to time? Absolutely. But I think it's better, you know, and I think that's part of the healing process is like, you know, just what happened. It was awful. They're not good people for doing this to you, but you'll be okay and you'll get better, you know? And I think that it was dark, but it was dark for a while, but it's better now. You know, it really is a lot better. And I am grateful for that, at least.
Good. That's good to hear. Something that I usually ask people who want to do an interview is there anything that you could have been told by anyone in your support system when you were in it that would have changed your mind and made you quit? I want to ask that a little bit differently to you. As someone who's lived it now, do you think there is anything that a support system can ask? Or is there anything that, any type of approach that would work on somebody who is involved in this right now that might get them to see what you saw before having to go through what you went through?
I mean, the best thing that I could say would be to just share horror stories of what happened. I mean, it's gross and it's ugly, but you have to put the mirror to people and show them what they're doing, or show them what they're becoming. And I will say, when you're in it, I can't really think of anything that you could say to get people to leave. You know, they have to make the decision themselves, and that's so frustrating. I mean, I know people personally that are in different like schemes, not with Cydcor, but like, you know, those online pyramid scheme kinds of things, and they just don't get it. And nothing I can say, no horror story that I can say can break them of that. And it's frustrating, you know, because like I said, I went through some nasty stuff, and I don't want anybody to go through what I went through, you know, because it does leave an impact on you. And it's just so awful that no one deserves that. And I wish I could say there was something that I had, but I just don't. You have to make the decision to leave for yourself. And sometimes people are very strong-willed and they can do it, or sometimes it takes a while and they have to build up, or sometimes it's one event, you know, one thing that sets them off. But unfortunately, I do think it has to be the person to make that choice. Even though I wish it wasn't the case.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the most frustrating things, I get messages from time to time are from people who are not in this, but have family who are. Usually it's children. I get messages from parents who have children who are in this, and they say, you know, what can I tell them? What can I say to them? And I don't have an answer for that, because I don't think there is anything. I mean, you can share. You know, there's tons of internet content out there. There's tons of stuff out there, but how are they going to interpret it? They're probably not going to interpret it as being realistic or as being privy to them or anything like that. So that's one of the worst parts of this, is I have to tell these people there's pretty much exactly what you said. It has to be their decision. Like, hopefully it's sooner rather than later, they will start to experience moments where they experience doubts and they start to question things, and then the facade starts to crumble a little bit, and then maybe on their own volition they'll get to Devil Corp's website, or they'll find Juicy Rhino's memes, or they'll find the Slave Circle or Devil Corp review, something like that. And then the rabbit hole, you know, then it opens up. Then they have the whole internet at their fingertips of what else is out there. But yeah, I completely agree. It's frustrating because you want to help, but you really can't. And I know, and having done so many of these interviews, I know for a fact that just you sharing your story is going to help. Because I know I have people that actively watch these who are not in the business. They just like to hear the horror stories. But I also know that due to algorithms, the people that need to find these stories will find these stories. And that's the best part about doing this, is that I know with every video, with every interview, it's going to help at least one person. It's either going to help them get out, or it's going to give them the information they need to not get in at all, which is the ultimate goal.